Welcome, everyone, to this Good Leadership Podcast. My name is Charles Good, your host and the president of the Institute for Management Studies. This podcast is designed to provide you with actionable insights and tools that you can use from discussing the research, stories, and background from recognized experts and practitioners to accelerate your impact in your current role. My goal is what we've discussed today will be immediately actionable and useful to you, and I'd love to hear your comments for this episode about what you're planning on implementing. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Dr. Vijay Govindarajan, who is widely regarded as one of the world's leading experts on strategy and innovation. Vijay is the first professor in residence and the chief innovation consultant at General Electric, where he worked with the former CEO, Jeff Immelt, to write How GE is Disrupting Itself for the Harvard Business Review that pioneered the concept of reverse innovation. He is also a New York Times and Wall Street Journal best-selling author and is the Coxe Distinguished Professor at Dartmouth College Tuck School of Business and the Marvin Bauer Fellow at the Harvard Business School. Thank you, Vijay, for joining me today.
Thanks for hosting me.
Today, I'd like to focus on your book, The Three-Box Solution, and really what that means to innovation. But before we unpack that book and some of those core concepts, love to hear more about your history and really what got you passionate and excited about this area.
Actually, it started in my formative years. You see, I grew up in a small town in India. And what happened was in my formative years, what I saw was lots and lots of problems. And my family had very few resources. And if you have lots and lots of problems and you have very few resources, the only way you can solve your problem is through innovation. There is no other way. We can't throw money at the problem. We don't have money. That is how I got really passionate about this topic of innovation. And it is my grandfather who spent countless hours educating me. I almost dedicate all my books to my grandfather, including my latest book, The Three-Box Solution. It is my grandfather who gave me meaning to what innovation is all about. And this is how it happened. You see, when I was in school, I used to stand first in class. That wasn't that difficult because there were only 10 kids in my class. And I know the other 9. I know how to beat them. Then I came to the university, and my university had 25,000 students, and I didn't know any of them. And I stood first in the university, won the gold medal, took the gold medal and my transcript to my grandfather. And my grandfather kind of looked at the transcript and he said, you only got 95 out of 100 in history. There is 5 possible marks you could have gotten. We got to close that possibility gap. You only got 90 out of 100 in English. There is another art of the possible. By the way, my grandfather wasn't trying to intimidate me. He wasn't trying to embarrass me. He wasn't trying to humiliate me. What he was telling me was, VG, never be satisfied in being a gold medalist amongst 25,000 students. That should never be your bar. Your bar should be your true potential. And your true potential is 100 out of 100. And of course, if you can achieve that, you're going to win gold medal amongst 25,000 students. That goes without saying. What my grandfather taught me was strategy is about achieving true potential. And you can achieve true potential only if you can master the art of innovation. What my grandfather taught me was make competition irrelevant. If you're Procter & Gamble, don't look at Colgate-Palmolive. That leads to mediocrity. The only competition that matters is self-competition. And self-competition is about achieving true potential. That means you have to search inside yourself and see, is there some more potential that you can achieve? By the way, no human can achieve true potential ever because the world keeps on changing. Therefore, new possibilities always arise. Similarly, no company can say they've achieved their true potential because the world keeps changing. Therefore, you have to continue to do breakthrough innovation to adapt to change. What my grandfather taught me was don't limit your achievements by your expectations. Your expectations limit what you do. By the way, as parents, we can play one of 2 roles. Either we can put pressure on our kids to perform or dare them to dream. My grandfather wasn't putting pressure on me to perform. He was daring me to dream. He was asking me to see the art of the possible. I say that is the underlying philosophy behind my three-box solution, which is to help companies see the future possibilities. Therefore, achieving true potential is to see how do we embrace breakthrough innovation while maintaining excellence in your current operation. That is the framework behind the three-box solution.
Those are some great insights and insights that apply both on an individual level as well as on an organizational level. Before we get into those three boxes, a lot of the leaders that I talk to, they have some misunderstandings about innovation versus creativity. And could you unpack a little bit about those differences and really what innovation means to you and what you're striving to embark by the three box solution?
I think the fundamental difference is the importance of three-box solution is on the execution. Creativity is about idea. Execution is about converting the idea into impact. And therefore, you can say, I want to create a self-driving car. That's an idea. But actually creating a business model around self-driving car, which is profitable, that is converting that idea into impact. Innovation is creativity and execution together. Too often we place too much emphasis on creativity. And as Thomas Alva Edison, the greatest innovator of all time, said, innovation is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. And that 1% inspiration is the creativity part, and 99% perspiration is the execution part. And that's what I particularly focus on.
Thank you for that distinction between the three. So the three box solution, it's a simple framework that recognizes all three competing challenges managers face when leading innovation. Love for you to give some insight on each one of the boxes. And why don't we start with box number one, which is managing the present core business at peak efficiency and profitability.
I think perhaps we can take an example. General Motors today, their box one business is the internal combustion driven gasoline powered automobiles. Today, 95% of their revenues are coming from that business. They have a job to do there, which is optimize the performance of that business model, because it is bringing in 95% of your revenues today. It is bringing in probably 100% of your profits today. And that is a business which is going to be there for the next decade or so. Therefore, your job in box one is what I call closing performance gap.
Great. So the box one, you're closing that performance gap, but the more successful you are in box one, that can hurt your performance with the other boxes, correct? So when we look at box two is really to escape the traps of the past by identifying and divesting businesses or abandoning practices, ideas, attitudes that are not relevant to this changing environment. But once again, the more successful you are right now, this may be a more difficult challenge, correct?
Without a question. And because the more successful you are in box one, the more you want to invest in box one. You think your current success is a validation of the past. Therefore, your way of thinking about the future is to do more of the past. And your current business has what I call a dominant logic. By dominant logic, what I mean is the kind of people you hire. So General Motors is hiring mechanical engineers, and you pay them certain salaries, and you have Six Sigma processes, because your manufacturing has to be absolutely defect free. You don't want to send a car with any defect. So it is all about reducing variance and achieving Six Sigma. And the competitor that you focus on is the other auto incumbents who are also making gasoline powered internal combustion driven automobile. Therefore, the more you excel in that, that is what the dominant logic allows you to do. It creates muscle memory. That is why box two in my three boxes is the toughest box, because It is not just intellectual memory. It becomes part of your system. Once it becomes muscle memory, that means the dominant logic has become an orthodoxy. Therefore, you don't even question why you are doing anything. You just do it because that's the way you've always done it. Therefore, the success prevents you from seeing the future because the self driving car, electric vehicles, ride sharing, which is the future of mobility, which is what the box 3 challenge is, that requires different people, different processes, different metrics, different capabilities. So your muscle memory doesn't allow you to get to box 3.
Thank you for that. I'd love to get more tactical with box 2 right now. And you mentioned there are 3 traps that are not irrational anomalies. They're inevitable, naturally occurring phenomenon that have to be understood and attacked head on if a corporation is able to forget the past. And they are the complacency trap, the cannibalization trap, and the competency trap. If you could go into a little more detail on those, or possibly even identify the one that is the most difficult to overcome.
I think all the 3 are equally difficult. Complacency trap is simply you are succeeding so much in your box 1, you feel I don't have any urgency to change. This is what my grandfather was teaching me. Once you win the gold medal amongst 25,000 students, you feel you've achieved the highest because there is nothing beyond gold medal. There is no platinum medal. So therefore, you feel you are on top of the world. Whereas what my grandfather was telling me, no, there is a possibility gap. You're missing. That is what complacency is. If you feel comfortable with winning gold medal, then you don't try harder. Competency trap is the more you succeed in box 1, your human resource organization builds talent to make you perform even better in box 1. That is the competency. You build competencies which will make you better in today's business. Your human resource people are not recruiting talent to make you a leader in the future. Cannibalization trap simply is you're afraid the new business model you have to create, the self-driving cars, in the case of General Motors, will eat into the sales revenue of the gasoline-powered cars or electric vehicles. If you create them, you are not going to generate the same service revenue that you're able to create in a gasoline-powered car, because in a gasoline-powered car, you need to change mufflers, you need to change oil, you need to change gas lines. None of that is there in electric vehicles. Therefore, cannibalization is about, will the future business eat into the sales revenue of today's business? All the 3 traps are the reason why box 2 is so difficult.
Thank you for unpacking those. Moving now to box 3, and that's really about creating the future. And really, it's about learning always precedes innovation. So you need to be able to take risks and commit to experimenting, which calls for really patient leadership. And you have a great example of a company, Keurig, in the book with their K-Cup pod manufacturing technology. So love for you to give some insights around box 3. How does a corporation, individuals, leadership create this type of experimentation, iteration, and future mindset that's also patient with these new technologies?
There are 3 important principles in successfully executing box 3, and one of them you touched, but let me talk about all the 3. The first principle, and all the 3 principles relate to execution. The first principle in executing box 3 is you must create a dedicated team. So if you're General Motors, your dominant logic has the muscle memory. Therefore, it can never execute self-driving cars. Never. Not because the box 1 dominant logic organization for General Motors has incompetent people. If it has got competent people, and if it is structured correctly, it is structured to improve efficiency in gasoline-powered internal combustion-driven automobile. That is what it is constructed for. It cannot do nonlinear innovation because electric vehicles, self-driving cars, ride-sharing is a nonlinear change to the traditional way you make and sell automobiles. Therefore, you must create a dedicated team. And the dedicated team should be built with fundamentally different principles as compared to the box one performance engine. And that's what General Motors has done. They bought a small Silicon Valley startup, Cruise Automation, in which they are investing very heavily. And Cruise Automation is creating the self driving software technology. That's what they are designed to do. They're creating the software for self driving cars. So that is a separate organization, physically separate, and that's in Silicon Valley. Their main traditional businesses are in Detroit, and they recruit artificial intelligence, computer scientists, software engineers, very different than the mechanical engineers they hire in their box one business. They tend to be younger in age because these software engineers are younger in age as compared to the traditional auto employees, but they are paid differently too, because a machine learning expert or an artificial intelligence expert is not saying, should I join General Motors or Ford? He is saying, should I join General Motors or Google? Therefore, you have to pay them differently. And the Cruise Automation is focused on different set of competitors, because the traditional automakers are competing against other traditional automakers like Volkswagen and Mercedes and Ford, etc. Whereas Cruise Automation is competing against Tesla, is competing against Waymo. There is a different set of competitors. That is why you must create a dedicated team. That is principle number one. Principle number two is that dedicated team cannot be isolated from the box one performance engine. If you isolate it, then there is no advantage to your dedicated team as compared to a pure Silicon Valley startup like Google's Waymo. The only reason your Cruise Automation is going to succeed as compared to a pure Silicon Valley startup is there is some asset of the box one performance engine that can benefit this dedicated team. And in this case, this is hardware, making a car, because a self driving car is still a car. It is not just a software. Therefore, this is integrating hardware and software. You should be able to know how to make a car reliably with high quality and then integrate the software. Therefore, the dedicated team, which is Cruise Automation, which is simply making the software for self driving cars, is connected to the mothership of General Motors so that they can understand and acquire the capabilities to actually build a car. So, that is the second principle. By the way, when the dedicated team has to borrow from the box one performance engine, there will be awful lot of conflicts, because you're asking a dedicated team which is built with very different principles as compared to the box one performance engine to collaborate with them. And that collaboration will never happen smoothly. There will be awful lot of conflicts. Therefore, that you have to learn how to manage down the conflicts. And there are several strategies you can use there. That is principle number two. Build a partnership between the dedicated team and the box one performance engine. And the principle number three is the test and learn, because the box three business is a bet on the future. That's all it is. Whereas your box one is a known business model. You have made internal combustion driven gasoline powered automobiles for 100 years. It is a known business model. Therefore, the whole focus in a known business model is to reduce variance. You have a business plan, you should not vary from it. You should absolutely hit the business plan. That is the challenge in box one. In box three, the challenge is to discover the future. That means I have to make rough prototypes, test it, learn it, refine it, and go. Therefore, it is test, learn, and pivot. Experiment and pivot. That is the mentality you have to have when you are designing software for self-driving cars, because you don't know answers to many questions. Three important principles: create a dedicated team for the box three project, connect the dedicated team with the mothership and manage that relationship as a partnership. Principle number two. Principle number three is let the leader of the dedicated team must construct low-cost experiments to test hypotheses in box 3. Because if the cost of testing a hypothesis is low, cost of learning is low, cost of failure is low. Fail early, fail fast, fail cheap, so that you galvanize behind a workable business model. These are 3 important execution principles. They are simple to say, but not simple to do. That is why execution in box 3 is so hard.
I agree with you. And you mentioned too that really you have to execute on the idea, and there's really 2 acceptable outcomes: a success or a failure that comes quickly and inexpensively as possible. The most undesirable outcome is that long, expensive, and painful failure. So you really need to test the most critical assumptions, which I think is so critical early on in anything. And some of those assumptions you bring up in your book, I think there's some great questions to ask to identify what those assumptions are. So wanted to move to, how do you balance between these 3 boxes? Because I assume the balancing piece is a challenge. What are some tips, tool strategies that you can recommend to our listeners on where do they focus? How do you balance between these 3 boxes so you move confidently into the future?
My general rule of thumb is anywhere from 50% up to 80% of resources should be in box 1, and the rest should be in box 3. This is sort of a rough estimate. In reality, it will depend on the dynamics of change in the industry in which you participate. There are some industries which are so rapidly changing, particularly the technology sector, which is so rapidly changing. There, you have to invest a lot more in box 3, because any box 3 you create will quickly become box 1. Therefore, you have to create the next box 3. There are some other industries where the rate of change may be slower. Therefore, you can exploit your box 1 for a lot longer time period. But there is not a single industry where you can simply relax and only focus on box 1. I can't think of a single industry where there is not going to be a non-linear future. Every industry is going to face a non-linear future. The rate of change is not equal in all industries. Therefore, you have to think about what's the rate of change in my industry. Therefore, what kind of portfolio of projects I need to have in box 1, and what kind of bets I want to take in box 3.
Thank you for providing that. Let's move now into the leadership behaviors that you mentioned. There's 6 of them that you mentioned in your book. We're not going to have time to unpack all 6, but I wanted to go through a few of those. And the first one I'd like to talk to is investing energy in the horse you can control in order to influence the horse you can't control. If you could unpack that a little bit for our listeners and just talk to that behavior in all 3 boxes.
You see, to me, that is a fundamental philosophy one should have in running one's life. And therefore, it also applies to organizations. In fact, my grandfather gave me this metaphor of the 2 horses, because he told me life is a journey. And in that journey, you're always pursuing goals. That's what life is. From the time you're born, you pursue goals. It could be to get into the right college, marry the right person, buy the right house, whatever the goal may be. So you're always on a journey towards a goal in your life. And the journey you take in a carriage, and that carriage is driven by 2 horses, 2 equally powerful horses. One horse you cannot control. Another horse you can completely control. Your job as the driver of that carriage is to only focus on the horse you can control and ride it as efficiently, as fast as you can. This other rogue horse, which you cannot control, may fall in line and you may achieve your goal, or you may not. That's the best you can do. But as human beings, we tend to focus on the horse we cannot control. And the paradox of life, my grandfather told me, was exactly at moments when you should focus on the horse you can control, or the moments you focus on the horse you cannot control. That is moments of adversity. Suppose you're a manager in a company, you didn't meet the performance goal. What is your first reaction? Your first reaction is, oh, there is inflation in the economy. Stock market is tanking. President of the United States is not doing a good job. Well, are you going to fix the president of the United States? No. Are you going to fix the inflation? No. When you focus on the horse you cannot control, you become miserable. You become unhappy. You become pessimistic. Whereas when you focus on the horse you can control, you feel liberated. You see possibilities. That doesn't mean the rogue horse is not there. Rogue horse is always there. But the best way you can influence the rogue horse is to focus on the horse you can control. That is the only way you can influence the rogue horse. I have internalized that in my career, and organizations should internalize that if they want to successfully execute clean evolution. Because what this two horse metaphor says is the horse you can control is the horse you should focus on. That means build the right core competencies, have the right strategic intent, have a test and learn mindset. That's you can do. Of course, there is going to be a rogue horse, uncontrollable things. You may still fail in box three, but the more you focus on the horse you can control, the chances of success goes up. You see, I'll give you a simple example. If, I am coming up for promotion at Dartmouth College, and suppose I don't get tenure at Dartmouth, I don't want to sit down there and wonder whether someone didn't like the color of my skin. That is why they push me down. I would rather over attribute failure to myself, because if I attribute failure to myself, I will do something about it. That doesn't mean I am naive to believe there are not racist people in the world. But my point here is, even the most racist person in the world, the only way I can change their mind is to do such a phenomenally good job. That person says, I don't want to push VG down. He's so good. I don't want to push him down. Another way you can think about it in the three-box solution framework, both for individuals and for organizations, is always pick box three projects where the horse you can control is more powerful than the horse you cannot control. The two horses are always there. Don't take on projects where the horse you cannot control is so strong that your chance of success is very low. You have a choice. You don't have to pursue every path. Therefore, what I tell individuals and organizations is, even if a day comes in your life or in the organization's life where things are bleak, suppose you're IBM in 1993, IBM is tanking. It's a dreadful company. Once it was a great company, it was a dreadful company. Lou Gerstner takes over as a CEO. Even when the company is absolutely rock bottom, always remember there is a horse there you can control. Find that horse. Even if you've reached the lowest point in your life, in your personal life, remember there is a horse you can control there. Find that horse. Ride that horse. You may come out of it. Instead of saying, why me? Why is this happening to me? Then you get into a downward spiral. You get into depression. So that is the principle behind two horses.
Thank you for that. Such a powerful metaphor, not only in business, but in life. We have time for one more of these behaviors, and I like to focus on create the future as a day-to-day process and recognize the future is now. And that impacts all three boxes. Love for you to talk more about that.
I think part of the reason why either individuals or organizations don't invest in box three is, if you don't invest in box three, it doesn't hurt you today. That is why you postpone those investments. Take, for instance, a box three investment for an individual, which is to do exercise every day. If you did exercise every day, you're assured of future health. Now, why can't you practice the simple, commonsensical thing? The problem here is, you may wake up today and say, you know what? I got so much to do today. I got to go and listen to this podcast from Vijay Govindarajan. I have to check my emails. I got a lot of work to do. I don't have time to do exercise today. By the way, if you don't do exercise today, your health doesn't decline today. You see, your health declines in the future, maybe in the year 2030. That is why you postpone doing that exercise. If you don't do exercise today, your health actually declines today. But the decline is so small, the decline is so insignificant, you don't notice. Part of what I'm saying is future comes in daily doses. Future never arrives all of a sudden in the future. You never become old one day. You are becoming old every day. Let's accept that. That means if you are General Motors, it is not like self-driving cars is going to arrive all of a sudden in the year 2050. It is happening every day. Slowly, your old business model is dying and a new reality is going to come. But it doesn't happen overnight. Therefore, the way to think about competition for the future is it is evolution in process, but revolution in effect. That is why I say future is now. Don't postpone actions about the future to some future date. If you want to create the future tomorrow, what you have to do today is the most important thing.
Great advice. As we reach the end of this episode, I always like to end with a question, a call to action. What would you recommend leaders should do first if they want to get better at employing and using your 3-box solution to innovation?
I think the most important thing is, first of all, understand the 3 boxes and understand the concepts and see how other companies have applied it. I've written a book, 3-box solution, where give a number of companies, and that's one very important place you should start. The other thing is I write a weekly column in LinkedIn on 3-box solution, giving my current thoughts and current examples. And if you're interested in following my work on innovation, you can certainly follow me on LinkedIn. You can even post questions on LinkedIn about issues that you're facing as you're executing the 3-box solution. In fact, I can use your question to write the next week's column because I'm always looking for questions from the audience that I can use to generate new knowledge, if you will. That is what I would say is the most important to get started.
Thank you so much for joining me today, Dr. Govindarajan. If you could remind our listeners how they can get in contact with you, possibly besides what you just mentioned, is there a website, an email that you would like to give out, or any contact information so they can reach out if they have any additional questions?
I think the best way to reach me is on my LinkedIn page because I'm an active contributor to LinkedIn and I have a influencer status in LinkedIn there. I don't even have to accept you. You can just press the button follow, you will follow. And any question you have on 3-box solution, you post there. I will both give you directly answer to it, but also I may use your question, as I said, to write my next weekly column so that everybody can benefit from it as well.
Thank you so much. And this concludes this episode of the Good Leadership Podcast. If you like what you heard today, please share this with your colleagues and friends and anyone else who might find this valuable. And if you'd like to subscribe, this podcast can be found both on Apple and Spotify. It can also be accessed on the Institute for Management Studies website at ims-online.com. And until next time, remember, it's not what you know, but what you do consistently that makes a difference.